Hey there, welcome to episode 81 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo, recording this late in the day. It's almost 4:30 on September 3rd, 2024, Tuesday. This was Labor Day week, Labor Day weekend, but Labor Day week, sometimes called a short week, but no rest for the civic volunteers among us. Well, actually, there sort of was. Don't think you got to work on weekends just because you're volunteering your time. Your time is valuable to yourself, the projects, other people. But let's get on with it. Today's episode is about the whole team. The whole team is a concept that you will read about in your Agile travels. If you flip through any of the writings about the original Agile manifesto, the people that created it back in 2001, whole team. Get everybody involved, get everybody on board. So that's what we're going to talk about today and how it sort of, it's a component of the Agile for Volunteers principles that we are driving. It's also a concept that any organization of civic volunteers, or really anybody, can adopt regardless of whether you are using Agile methodologies, maybe Scrum, maybe Waterfall, maybe Holacracy. Whatever works. In fact, Holacracy is sort of a whole team on its own. That's a different thing. One day we'll have to talk about Holacracy. My thoughts on that. Anyway, fun facts. City of Las Vegas, right here. Downtown Project. Downtown Las Vegas. Downtown Project was the largest deployment of the Holacracy method to date, up until several years ago when they did this. Zappos also deployed Holacracy, so I'm not sure how they judged the size of the deployment. Anyway, Zappos and Downtown Project, big installations of Holacracy. So that's another time, another discussion. Today we are talking about whole team in general, and specifically how it applies to the initiatives that we are putting our time and energies into, and of course the Agile for Volunteers methodology that we're continuing to develop. Hopefully wherever you have found this audio program, you are able to see the episode description wherein you shall find the show notes. I have 4 links for today. They're basically 4 from last week also. Still relevant. I will read the summary in our show notes, and then we will begin. One of the more essential elements of the original Agile, again from February 2001, brought over to Agile for Volunteers and to our endeavors in general, is the notion that all participants should be able to and should be enabled and encouraged to contribute to the planning, implementation, and ongoing development of initiatives and projects. This may be a new idea for newcomers and maybe even a curious thing for non-coders. So let's get into it. For the links, we have the usual suspects. We have our homepage for our organization, Linux Innovate for Vegas Foundation. I said Linux for some reason. innovateforvegas.org, FOR spelled out, Innovate for Vegas, no hyphens, dashes, underlines, innovateforvegas.org. Our GitHub organization on github.com/innovateforvegas, once again spelled out, Innovate FOR Vegas. We have our Project Act. Technically, it's an organization, even though it's called a project. Project Act is the autonomous cohort tessellation, and at the same time, autonomous cohort transformation. I've already done episodes about this. GitHub.com/project-act. ACT. By the way, GitHub gave us the the free tier, the nonprofit charity project organization tier that they offer. Innovate for Vegas has had that for over 2 years now. I contacted them and said, Project Act is a collaboration between our existing 501c3 and ideally others, whether they are determined, whether they're determined 501c3 organizations or just designated as nonprofits or fiscally sponsored clubs, et cetera, et cetera. So GitHub gave us that free tier for Project Act as well. Very nice. Finally, Agile for Volunteers. This is currently it's a documentation repository for our Agile for volunteers, methodology, principles, and so on. We're going to be breaking that off into a completely separate, right now it's part of our infrastructure initiative. It will become its own initiative, Agile for volunteers, with some tools, the documentation, and so on and so on. So still very much a work in progress, as most things always will be in this realm. So let's begin with the whole team Agile origins, the original Agile Manifesto, and arguably prior in different forms, extreme programming, Scrum to a certain extent. It was about bringing people together, pair programming, sharing ideas, and so on. So not a brand new idea. It's a notion that people on a software development team should be generally familiar with the overall plan, the overall need to adjust the plan with time and discovery, and general familiarity with how the work of others on the team fits into the big picture. This approach enables good ideas to enter the discussions and the processes along the way without the notion that a design, perhaps a faulty design, is being dictated to the team from on high. We can tune this project and make good stuff, so the thinking goes. So if we working on it have a say in what we are working on and how we can make it better, I've been at this for 30 years. That's only since getting out of college, so arguably longer. I have yet to run into a serious, legitimate person in the, I was going to say software world, but really the technology world, or really, it's hard to find a decent human being who sets out to build something that is broken, that is hurtful. Now, there are people that do that. Those are not good people. So if you are working with bad people, there's a different podcast for you. But if you're working with people who want to volunteer their time and want to elevate their communities and so on, it would be difficult for me to say with any sort of certainty that the people that volunteer want to do bad things or make broken stuff. Like, yeah, I just want to spend my time not helping. So it's probably a good presumption to begin along an initiative journey that the people who want to be involved want good outcomes. All of the people who want to be involved. When the whole team is participating, the whole team can contribute in small ways, big ways, across the initiative domain, and can continue to make progress in the face of distraction, unexpected or expected absence. People can go on vacation, there are emergencies that arise, and even team exits, not to mention additions to the team. So the team can change. There will be sort of a dynamic component, temporary or permanent, or longer than temporary. And then the circumstances change, the requirements or needs of your customers, the people who will be using your outcomes. And mostly the whole team notion in Agile came from software engineering, which we'll get into in the next bullet point. But this applies to just about anything, really. So Agile was conceived by and for software engineers, again, back in 2001. Software developers, coders, engineers, hackers, whatever. Take your pick. The good news, Agile principles can apply to non-software initiatives since, at their core, these principles are about making effective use of time, effort, and expertise to create and maintain good things, good stuff that works. Could be stuff that tastes good, smells good, right? How often have you seen restaurant-oriented shows on television? Maybe it's a reality type show. Who's that? There's a show about kitchen, like fixing restaurants that are otherwise broken. Ultimately, they will speak to everyone that works at the restaurant, try to figure out what's going on. Everyone that works at the restaurant will be a part of improving the restaurant. Bars, hair salons. There have been reality shows around this. And of course, they are produced for television. They've been edited and contrived. I've been involved with a reality show, America's Greatest Makers. I will tell you, edits are real. So what you're seeing is crafted to be interesting or, to get viewers. So it's not always an accurate representation of reality, but bottom line, you will find that whenever quote unquote reality shows are produced to illustrate the behind the scenes and so on, it at ongoing concerns, restaurants, bars, hair salons, whatever, that it's more than just the owner, the chef. It'll be everybody, whole team. Looking at the whole team notion in particular from Agile or from, like I said, extreme programming and so on. There are times when one who may label themselves a coder or an artist or a language translator is also a normal person, maybe a person interested in building a useful, high-quality initiative outcome, whatever it is. With some ideas, insights, observations, there is no reason to believe that any one contributor is not able to make a contribution. Occasionally, the contribution will come in the form of a suggestion, even though the individual may not be able to implement. I will point out later, I have really no innate graphical, even aesthetic talents. So what I could do is when I see something, say, that's confusing, or that color combination is odd, or the take home from that illustration or that icon or that visualization is somehow confusing, or maybe it's not reaching me the way maybe it's intended, and so on. So I can provide that sort of. I'm not an artist. I am not aesthetic, but I could still contribute. So it would be an error to presume that only people of a certain level of expertise would have something to say. You can apply this in a restaurant, right? The person bringing the production from the kitchen to the customers seated in a dining room, they're going to see that first impression. They're going to see the feed, or they're going to hear maybe the feedback. How is everything? Well, it's a little bit salty. It's a little bit undercooked. It might not be something that makes it all the way to the kitchen. They might say, oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. But this is the sort of feedback that could make it back to the team. That's why whole team is important. There are people that will have insight, contribution, knowledge that can add to the whole team effort. There is no reason to believe that any one contributor is not able to make a contribution. Don't forget that. Since volunteer initiatives, production by street, since volunteer initiatives count on this volunteer time, effort, and expertise contributed to make them go, to make progress, etc., to reach some point of usability, maybe enough usability or quality or even innovation to really impress, like make your customers happy. Remember, people that are using what you're making, building, cooking, etc., are your customers, and they're not always appearing at a cash register or signing a check. They're just consumers of what you're producing. Credit should be given to the whole team, not just one or two, not just the top, not just the coders. As is so true of so many things, rarely are the people most visible the most responsible. Let us give credit to all where credit is due. So in adopting a whole team approach, it's important to avoid presumptions. Our history of our Innovate for Vegas Foundation includes our initial organization named Code for Vegas Foundation, with the actual question asked several times, I am not a coder, can I participate? Now, these questions and the people who are asking them have kind of faded away, but the point remains, not everything is code. And I will be honest, initially I felt the historical reference to the original Code for Vegas was important for legacy, continuity, etc. Turns out not at the expense of people wanting to participate or feeling welcome to participate. So when teams are split into silos by interest or focus, like you're the coders, you're over there, you're the non-coders. There's coders and everybody else. The project itself can become siloed, right? So you're splitting up. We don't have to get into, and I've talked about this already, we don't have to discuss Conway's Law. We don't need to split up our initiative efforts based on some sort of community notion, the bad word, of who should be sitting near whom. Anyone who is on the team is always on the team from a contribution point of view, including anybody with the time and inclination in any discussions, whether for initiative and project planning, iteration planning, actual implementation, and so on. So everybody's on the whole team. You may be doing different things at different times. You may not always be in on every iteration, but anybody who wants to be a part of the team should be part of the team. When we qualify inclusion, we are missing out. So if we say, well, you're not a coder, so go sit with the non-coders, you're missing out on an opportunity for learning. You're maybe some production by street, maybe some insights that don't come from typing on a keyboard in C or JavaScript or some other programming language, but from being involved in other software projects. You might be working with somebody with a quality assurance, QA background, or project management. They're proximal. They've been adjacent. They kind of have some insights that are not traditional. So if you're just a coder, you might see things through a coding lens. And so having the opportunity to interact with someone who can speak your language, but from a different perspective, might be useful. It's a mistake to presume otherwise. Similarly, presuming that someone, you've only been working on user interface design for 2 years. Yeah, but those might be really good years. And if you're talking as someone who doesn't really design user experience or user interface, that's 2 more years than you might have. So yeah, it's a mistake to presume based on age, based on years of experience. You should look more at what does someone have to say? What have they got to contribute? What do they have to contribute? Communication is key. So communicate. In order for a team of any kind to function, it is likely that the members of that team must be communicative. You can probably get away with not communicating all the time, but it would help if you did. Sometimes this is true. Sometimes you can get away. Sometimes you cannot. Your mileage may vary, particularly when there is a dependency between different parts of the team. Are you waiting for me to invite you to a meeting and I am waiting for you to indicate interest in being invited to a meeting? Well, then we're both going to be waiting a lot. When in doubt, initiate communication, especially when it comes to volunteer time. The nuance of who might be thinking what might represent opportunities lost. Misdirecting those mental and temporal resources towards pondering. Should I go to that meeting? Should I work on something? I haven't heard from the person, so should I just wait? Maybe I should just go work on something else. You should spend those energies on communicating. Just say it. If no response comes, that may well be your answer. If you send the invite rather than waiting to figure out if you should send the invite and you don't get an answer, well, it's not for a lack of communication. It's a lack of response. But that is indeed a response. Oh, I was on vacation. Oh, I was out of town. Oh, I had an emergency. That's okay. The invitation was available. Action can proceed knowing that the invitation was sent. Same with most things. I would like to fix a bug. I would like to design a user interface. I would like to make a color selection. I'm going to put it out there. If nobody has anything to say, it'll just happen. But you don't have to wait. Communicate. While there may be some implied hierarchy, maximizing volunteer time will often mean keeping the communication pathways flat, which actually helps to enable and encourage discussion and action across the team. This can extend beyond the team as well when it comes to seeking contemplation, collaboration, and contribution from others working on some other part of the current initiative, some other initiative entirely, maybe people in other organizations, other geographical locations, people near and far. This is one goal of Project ACT, by the way, is to connect, communicate, collaborate. The people that you want to connect, communicate, and collaborate with may have no idea you exist and that your project or your initiative are underway, so they have to discover each other. Then, I didn't know you were working on that. Let the communication begin. The use of tools can make this a little bit easier, It is important to be able to communicate in such a way as the communications are found. Posing a comment or question to a platform that is not on the reading list of your fellow team members may not help much. You may get other comments. So you're certainly not precluded from posting a question. In my travels, I have been known to post back in the Usenet days, hey, has anyone ever seen this problem? You will sometimes see a post on social media, hey, lazy web, is anybody working on this thing? Hey, does anybody know how to fix this? You'll see this on Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, Reddit, the list goes on. So posting questions and external communications are not bad, but they don't necessarily count as communication with your fellow team members. You may get other comments, you may get trolled, you may get helpful or or not helpful or otherwise responses. They don't necessarily count as communication. We are focused on making use of the GitHub platform. I don't know if you heard that one, production by Street. So we can use GitHub discussions per project repository, component project repositories, used for exactly that, for discussions, and issues used to plan the initiative, the goals, stories, features, and so on, and to synchronize initiative tasks. We have a Discord server for Innovate for Vegas Foundation, but what then? Discussion may take place in one or two places or more. But why? Why do that? The nature. Now you could, if you have a Discord server, if you want to use social media platforms, the old and broken things like Facebook or Twitter, or the new and cool things like Mastodon or Lenny, activity streams and activity pub for the win. You may engage with people in your communities, your local consumers of what you're trying to build, your customers. You may engage with people who are not going to jump on GitHub, sign up for a username, participate in a discussion. The discussions and the nature of GitHub as a platform for the sake of initiatives and component project planning and sort of management, in quotes. Project management is a general thing to do, not a job description per se. In this context, whole team should sort of collaborate on the project management as well as execution. We don't have a hierarchy. Not really, not an explicit one. Nobody's getting paid to be a project manager. So the nature of, we're focused on that, using the tools that we have at our disposal in ways that make sense. So the nature of human communication means sometimes a private message or even a private group chat or an email thread is useful. Sometimes you don't want to broadcast a question or comment or a concern. Maybe it's a sensitive topic. Maybe you don't want to risk sharing personal private information, personally identifying information, if you like, PII. But it is important to remember that private can mean lost opportunity. Fun fact, this actually happened. I was working at Jawbone, formerly Aleph, the makers of Bluetooth headsets with the little nub, which was actually a microphone that would touch your jawbone so it could detect when you were speaking. They eventually were making the Jambox and some other things, and I don't think they're in business anymore. So Jawbone, there was an issue that I had discovered. I spent several days tracking it down, testing, hands-on, examining source code, measuring in our laboratory, some audio measurements and so on. And when I spoke to, I think he was the firmware manager for the team in China that was doing manufacturing, he said, "Oh yeah, we have that. We already found that." I said, "Oh, where is it? Where is it documented? Or is there a bug open? Or is there?" He said, "Oh no, it's in an email thread." So he forwarded me an email conversation from several, like a week or two prior. I said, "Well, you've hidden the answer in an email that I had no access to." And so I wasted my time on figuring out what the problem was. With communication between your whole team, you can spend valuable time, especially volunteer time, on fixing things, not rediscovering. We don't need to reinvent wheels. So private conversation about wheels and inventing wheels is not the kind of conversation to have. So it's important to be contemplative when it comes to private communications, where or it's possible that a private discussion or private conversation might yield something useful. You can forget the private back and forth. You don't have to risk sharing opinions or private information, but the outcome might be useful. Make sure that's made visible to the team. Don't store it in your inbox. When you do store things in your private discussions, your private chats, or maybe you have a WhatsApp group or whatever, when you store those and they're not merged back, the outcomes are not merged back into the general team discourse, you're hiding information. intentionally or unintentionally. You may, as in my example, you may be thinking, okay, we've solved the problem. I don't need to tell anyone until you realize, oh, other people are encountering this problem. They're going to spend the same time or more, maybe less, as we did in our email conversation. They're going to recreate what we have already found. So why not just take that result and say, oh, by the way, we found that, let's file a bug or a release note or whatever your preferred methodology is. Hey, this is something we found. Let us add to the knowledge of the team rather than hiding information, because you're not only hiding it from your current team members, but your future team members who don't necessarily know what they don't know. They don't know who to ask. They don't know what to ask. So they will begin the same journey and will encounter the same hidden. And why didn't you post that somewhere? Why? Oh yeah, somebody that used to work here said the same thing. It's probably in an email somewhere. There are upsides to whole team. Our organization is working on open source, community elevation initiatives. Yours might be also. You might be working on something completely different. Volunteer time, effort, and expertise are all essential to what we're doing, how we're doing it. And these may be available from experienced individuals or newcomers to a particular field. So you may be working with a recent graduate of a training program, a vocational program, college, even high school, self-taught. Maybe they have their own, whatever it is. It could be a software company. It could be an art company. It could be a user interface or user experience. The list goes on. So you may be working or collaborating with different people, different levels of experience. But here's the important thing, which I alluded to earlier. I have a lot of experience in one area, one collection of areas, but I don't have a lot of experience in other areas where I don't have particular skill, especially when it comes to aesthetics, user experience design, user interface design more so. I think I have some relevant, I'll say, experience or insights perhaps into user experience, but I have a lot to learn still. So if I'm working with people where others have more experience in user experience or user interface or aesthetics, graphic illustration, color schemes, the list goes on. We can list different roles and different nuances all day. So a mix of different skill and experience levels is a good thing. If we were to simply let a skill or experience hierarchy dictate communication paths, and again, Conway's Law, which we don't need to adhere to, we may find questions unanswered, comments unmade, progress unrealized, because we're waiting for the person who does this. Like, oh, I'm not a coder, therefore I won't make a comment on a thing that I've noticed or a problem I've encountered. And this is where you get into bug reporting. Enable the people involved in your project, whether they're external, normal people, in quotes, your customers, or people working on the project, enable everyone to provide their findings, their insights, regardless of their personal, maybe they identify as a coder, but it doesn't mean you don't have other insights. So don't label yourself, don't sequester yourself when it comes to conversations. Don't feel you should be left out of conversations just because you are not in the conversation, if that makes sense. So if we let the hierarchies dictate communications, we lose. We as a team and we as an organization. One notion found in extreme programming and Agile, pair coding can show some real benefit if the pair is a mixed skill or experience pair, is of mixed skill or experience, so that progress is made. Sure, you might fix a bug or implement a new feature or refactor something, but nuance can lead to some learning for both involved. Somebody who has been around for a long time may find, oh, the latest version of this tool does this better. It's a little bit faster. It will help by highlighting some syntax or adjusting. It'll do some memory usage validation. It will find null pointers, whatever it is. Some tools that may be in place that, I've been doing this way for 30 years. Like, well, I've been doing it for 5, but in the last 5 years, here are some new developments. So those of us stuck in our ways may be just as disadvantaged, if you will, if you like that term, as someone who doesn't have that experience, but who has been closer to modernity. The same may be true from an artistic or creative or, knowing the tools, knowing how they work. Coding by a street. Today's a busy traffic day. Just knowing your way around your own skills and abilities and the tools and the methodologies and best practices and so on. So the old ways are not always the best ways. Although knowing the old ways can come in handy. So that's where you get some information exchange, some learning in both directions in the case where you have different levels of experience. But, that you can combine teams, pairs, or otherwise. Gang programming. It doesn't have to be programming. If we're designing a user experience, we're going through the user path. How do I get from, hey, I would like to sign up for this, to getting a useful outcome? Someone who doesn't have any experience doing that, but who does live in the world, might have thoughts. So extend this to all aspects of an initiative. I myself, like I said, have 30 years of software, not skilled in the way of graphic illustration. So if I work with someone who is, even though they're junior level, perhaps, maybe they've designed with the latest React Native web components. Maybe they're designing for mobile. They're totally familiar with PWAs, progressive web apps. They completely understand accessibility, the why ARIA, built-in infrastructure for React Native, or other ways to accomplish that with different infrastructure, libraries, modules, frameworks. They know their way around the tool. So I may have lots of experience in one area, but very little in another. They may have less experience in a particular area, but way more than me. So that doesn't mean that I should say, well, I've been doing this forever. There are some cases where that's true, some cases where it's not, and that applies to everyone on the whole team. So there's always some opportunity to give and take. That should sound familiar. Raising a concern should, ideally, turn into some action, to be taken or actually taken, regardless of who raises it and who takes it. By the way, we're coming to the end, I promise. The whole team is involved and can respond to each item on a to-do list in the best way for the team at that time, in that moment. That can change. Maybe a day or a week later, some additional conversation takes place, some collaboration, maybe a pivot. Somebody may not have been around for that conversation initially. Somebody may join from somewhere else. Somebody might have some insights. The list goes on and on and on. If the whole team can communicate so that there's not a feeling that, oh, that's for you to address and I will wait silently over here, but instead be a part of that. Like, hey, is there anything I can do to make this move forward? Is there something, because I would like to use the thing. Can I help make progress on the thing so we can move on to the next thing? So anything is possible. And if whole team communication and participation are high on the list, if they become a part of your organization culture or just your own personal culture, you will probably see some benefit. Even in cases where some action is taken ad hoc. That is, somebody might say, oh, I got to fix that. I got to change that. I'm going to try this experiment. I'm going to do a thing. Alerting and communicating can help to include the whole team after the fact, unlike the hidden email scenario. Like, hey, by the way, I did this thing and it seems to work. I had to put out a fire. I had to solve a problem. I had to fix a data loss bug. I had to change some structure to the user interface because it looked like we were doing something confusing or telling someone to do the wrong thing or the wording. It could be anything. So fixing something, that may lead to an additional conversation and a new change, right? Sometimes things can change fairly quickly and easily, very low cost, unless you went out and printed up 1 million glossy flyers and then said, oh, we forgot to check it. There's an error. Quite often, if there's a soft change, then there could be another soft change. If you haven't committed money, physical, tangible resources to something, it's always possible to iterate. Ultimately, the whole team should agree that the whole team made an initiative happen with attribution, recognition, and celebration for all involved. And that's where at the end of the story, the credits, if you're making a movie, and by the way, the credits are super important In the film industry, if you ever go watch a movie, you know how at the end there's just piles and piles of credits. You know, who's the key grip and who's the gaffer and who did the lighting and who did the cinematography. Everybody gets credit because that is an industry standard. It comes down to unions and guilds. I literally just was, as part of a longer book that I'm reading, there was mention of back in the Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie, before it was even called A New Hope. George Lucas wanted to do something unusual. He wanted to start the movie with the now infamous crawl, the text that was fading off into the background, single point of, what do you call that? Perspective, single point perspective, disappearing point of perspective. This was an abomination to people in the Directors Guild. They said, no, you start a movie with the title of the movie and the director and the writers, and then you give credits to all the people involved, then you start the movie. He said, no, I think it'll be a better experience for my audience if I do the crawl, and then we drop into the movie and we'll do the credits at the end. And truth be told, if it is true, he was fined $250,000. Those are $1977, so it would be at least $1 million today. To George Lucas, still maybe not a lot of money, but the fact is that this was very upsetting to the status quo. So everybody should get credit for their work. That's one of our underpinnings, one of our sort of standard ethical bullet points. If you contribute to a project, unless you opt out, unless you say, no, anonymous, please, you get credit for your contributions. Everything that makes a project go is a contribution. You may be the coder, but you may also be the tester or the person who checked the documentation, copy editing, language translation. These are all just as important in some way. You can say which is the more important part of the ship, the left half or the right half. Kind of need the whole thing. So that is about the end of this treatise on whole team. Not as long as most episodes. You can hear my voice is still arguing with me. The weather in Vegas is so weird. So my allergies are particularly challenging to me. I do take, what's it called? Totally spacing on the name. I do take an allergy medication. I did not take it this morning. I took it last night. 12-hour. There you go. Problem. Loratadine. Thank you. Loratadine actually works. 10 milligrams loratadine actually seems to help if I can. And I only recently sort of made this adjustment to my approach. So I think the last 2 or 3 days. Lesson learned. So we'll keep the show short today. We're going to talk about more of this stuff into the future. Don't forget to check out our website, our GitHub repositories in our different organizations, whether it's the Innovate for Vegas organization or the Project Dash ACT organizations. Those links are in our show notes for this episode, and they frequently appear in our episode descriptions. It's important to know where to find us. The list of things to do continues to grow. The list of people who want to participate needs to do the same. That's part of what we're pursuing, especially when we look beyond Nevada. You can innovate for Vegas. You don't need to innovate in Vegas. We do have 40 million visitors each year visiting our little oasis in the desert. That's a nice population cross-section to try out ideas on when it comes to user experience, utility, productivity, positivity, and so on. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Clearly, my voice has already left the building. I will do the same. Thank you so much for listening, as always. Take care. Till next time.